guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carla. I'm in Australian Melbourne and I love to crochet and knit, and I like to talk about my knitted and crochet projects I have happening and hopefully to inspire you to create something handmade with yarn. So in today's little podcast, I want to talk about all things knitted socks and my tips if you want to start making socks for yourselves or as gifts. They make beautiful gifts. Of course, if you're a crocheter, you can also make socks, and I will give you some examples of crochet patterns you can use. I have made a pair and they work out beautifully. They might take a little bit more yarn, but of course you can make socks using your crochet skills. But in this little podcast, I'm just going to talk about exclusively knitted socks and my current addiction in making socks. Now, why I love making socks is they're very practical to make socks and it's something that you will use every day. So even though you make 100 pairs, you will use those 100 pairs of socks. So that's one thing. It's not only unique and very luxurious to wear cozy and warm handmade socks, but you will actually use them. Okay guys, so let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is the yarn you will need to make some socks. So you know that when you the yarn that you choose should be a little bit more wearable because you will be walking with them. So you want a little bit more stronger yarn. So most of the yarn that you would use for sock will contain a percentage of nylon or polyamide to make it a little bit stronger. So I love making socks with hand-dyed yarn, and it's the perfect introduction to using hand-dyed. So if you've been tempted to use it, socks are actually a good starting point because they only require one skein of hand-dyed yarn, so it won't break the bank. You don't have to have 5 or 6 skeins that you would usually need to make a jumper, for instance. Okay, so some examples. So I love trying out Australian dyers. So the last sock yarn that I bought is from Gumleaf yarn here in Australia. She's up in Queensland and she does beautiful yarn, and she recently had a sale on a sock set. So the main color would be 100-gram skeins and which would be plenty to make onto a pair of socks. But she also includes a little mini skein, which is usually 20 to 25 grams. So if you decide you want to do a contrasting toe or heel or even a calf, this will be also plenty to do that, and that would be beautiful, give you a little pop of color. So you don't have to, you can, this 100 gram will be more than plenty to create a pair of socks. So this is, I can't wait to custom with this. Of course, you can have something bold. Again, this has 85%, this one's made of 85% twist superwash merino and 50% nylon. So that will give you strength and it will stand some wear and tear. I think some of the brands, they actually guarantee 10 years of wear of their sock yarn, and the example I'm giving is the regia ball of yarn. They recommend that they state that their yarn is so strong that it should be able to last you for 10 years, which is pretty amazing. So this one's particularly special because it's cotton, so you don't have to make wool socks. So this is actually quite new to me. The last time I went to my local yarn store, which is the Granny store in here in Melbourne, they showed me this new range, which is cotton. Is 85% cotton, 72% cotton, 80% polyamide and 10% polyester. So the last two will give you strength to the yarn and will withstand you wearing and walking with them. So yeah, and I can't wait to try it out. Can you see how it is actually very springy? It feels quite different to wool and really soft and light, which will be perfect for spring and summer. So you can still wear your socks in the warmer months. And look at this watermelon striping effect. It'd be so cool. I'm going to make, now with these bold colors such as this and that, I would recommend picking a pattern that's very simple. So no complicated or intricate lace patterns or cabling, because the color would, you would lose the effect of that pattern. So for bold colors, try very simple design sock patterns, because you want to show off the color and not the pattern, if you know what I mean. Okay, so these are my ideas for yarn. So yeah, so be aware that it should have some nylon or polyamide to add strength to the yarn. So for instance, this gorgeous skein from More Yarn & Co here in Australia. It's absolutely gorgeous, but it is merino, 70% merino wool and 30% silk. So it probably is too soft and beautiful to use for a pair of socks. So this I'll leave behind for a shawl. Of course, you don't have to use hand-dyed yarn. This was not a hand-dyed yarn. Regia have an amazing set of sock finger and weight yarn. And this is another one of their self-striping style of yarns for socks, and it's just a simple cuff down pattern. And look at the effect it makes. It's just like magic. You'll get a beautiful integrated design just by following the instructions, and a very simple pattern. So no lace or no cabling to show off this gorgeous self-striping feature. Okay, now so again, you don't have to choose hand-dyed yarn. You can also, many brands will have yarn that is appropriate for socks. Now, if you're here in Melbourne, Bendigo Woolen Mills, if you use their brand, also have a range of sock weight yarn. I'm holding one right here. It's in this beautiful soft and pastel color. Again, it's probably about $14 a ball. I think that from memory, it's a little bit cheaper than hand-dyed yarn, and it will still look beautiful, these color transitions for some socks. I'm using it to make a shawl, but this is particularly for socks. Now, the other brands that you can use, for instance, I haven't cast on yet, but these gorgeous knit picks will create a candy stripe effect. So yeah, so you don't have to use hand-dyed yarn. There's a whole bunch of yarn they can use. Just make sure that it's suitable to making socks. Alright guys, how about needles? Most socks would advise you, or most patterns for socks will advise you to use anywhere between 2 to 3 millimeter needles, and anything that will meet gauge. Obviously, if you're a loose or tight knitter, you have to check that. All the socks that I've made, or all the patterns that I've used, have recommended 2.25 millimeter needles. Because it's such an integrated and fine weight yarn, I like to choose my needles that are particularly pointy. So one of my favorites to use at the moment are Knit Pros, Highers, and Addies. So the Addies range is that I like to use, that is a little bit more pointy for finer work, is the lace. So these ones are 2.25, which are with a 30 centimeter cable. So this will be good for doing one sock at a time and cuff down. This will be suitable for this type. I wouldn't necessarily use it for toe up, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But if you want to work in the round in small little projects like socks, this is a good length, or even 25 centimeters. So I've got a 25 centimeter Knit Pro, which I'm currently working. I've just completed the heel of my sock, and I will talk about the construction of socks in a minute. But again, this is a 25 centimeter or 20 centimeter cable, and little tiny needles, and it's a Knit Pro. And again, they've got a nice little point, which makes it easy to knit fine yarn. Again, it's easy to work in the round. You don't have to really create a magic loop for it. But again, I would only use it for a cuff down type of sock. And I'll not let you know why. So the other types of needles you can use are longer ones with a longer cable if you're going to do the magic loop method, which is ideal if you're doing toe up socks. So I will explain what I mean by that in a minute, but I'll show you the types of needles I mean, and where is my other one? So yeah, so these ones are Highers and have an amazing little tip, which I love, and I will show you the sock in a minute, but they are great. This will be ideal to do 2 socks at a time, which you can do. It's actually very efficient, so you don't have to create one and then do the whole process for the second one. So if you're getting a little bit advanced in making socks, then you definitely should try doing 2 socks at a time. So these Highers have a long cable, but because I'm using the magic loop, it actually works fine. It's actually very easy to create socks with long cables. You don't have to worry about that. And this is ideal for toe up socks. So these are my Highers. And lastly, the ones that I'm working on at the moment for a pattern test is my Knit Pros. Again, they have a long needle and a pretty long, I think this could be a 30 to 40 centimeter cable. So I think that these 2 types of needles, ones that are long and have a longer cable are great for toe up, and the shorter mini little needles are good for cuff down if you want to do one sock at a time. Okay guys, now before I go into the construction, I love making socks, but it's not a project that I would strongly recommend or would recommend for a beginner knitter. So if you've done a couple of things and you want to think, oh, maybe I'll make some socks, it could be a little bit challenging. So my niece started making beanies and she's loving knitting, and she thought, oh, Auntie Carla, she saw me making socks and she said, the next thing I want to make is some socks. And because she thought, because it looked small and a small item, that it'd be really easy to do. It's something not, I wouldn't necessarily say it's easy, only because, you know, you are using fine yarn. It's actually a little bit more intricate, and the stitch patterns is actually quite basic at times, but again, it's the construction of it that can be a bit challenging. So I would recommend, if you're a beginner, maybe having a little bit more experience making bigger items or simpler designs before tackling a pair of socks, which might make you a little bit frustrated. Okay, so having said that, let's go into how to construct the basic constructions of socks. There are two main methods you can use. It's the cuff down or the toe up. Now the cuff down method I would recommend for beginners because I found it a little bit easier. It made a little bit more sense. Casting on was easier for me. You just cast on the number of stitches you need for the size, and the pattern will tell you it will be from small to large, and will let you know what size you need for your foot size. So an example of a cuff down sock is this one. So you would have cast on the number of stitches at the beginning, formed a ribbing, like purl one, knit one, and then continue to form the leg. And this is, you can make it as long as you want or as short as you want. Then you'll create the heel, and then create the foot, and at the end you do some decreases and to form the toe. And then you can you will seam up the toe using the Kitchener stitches to seal the toe area. So I found this construction quite easy. If you've never made socks, I would recommend trying making cuff down socks. I found the construction a little bit less brain power necessary to do it. It just made more sense. Of course, now the heel is probably the most challenging bit of making the sock, and there is actually quite a few different patterns, different styles of making heels. This was created by Short Rose. Others, you can use the afterthought heel. You can use the fish kiss lips. It's probably something that you need to trial and see what type of heel you prefer. I know that some people also find that some heels fit better in their type of foot size. They might find the type of heel much more comfortable to wear, or it just fits their foot better. So it's really up to you. I find this type of design, this short row heel cuff down, are really quite easy to do. So I quite enjoyed that. But I know some people prefer the kiss lips because it just fits better. So it's really up to you. Give them a go. Try a couple of patterns. Again, if you're a beginner, try a simple pattern with no instep design, so that you don't find this so frustrating. But it's definitely worth a go. And using a self-striping yarn like this one, you'll get a great effect with not much challenging stitch-wise. I mean, it's just stockinette and some ribbing at the top. Okay, so another cuff down sock that I made is a little bit more challenging. It is called the Lavender Malt sock by Celine Bos, and it is absolutely gorgeous. It is worth cuff down, so you start from the top, create your cuff, and then do your heel, again by Short Rose, and obviously close up at the toe. Now, what makes this a little bit more interesting and intricate is the design. Look at this. This is just some lace work, some yarn overs and beautiful lace just at the instep. I think that not most, but a lot of the patterns will do a lovely intricate design for the instep or the front of your sock, and then the back and the heel, which is really, you won't really notice, they leave it as just plain stockinette, which is actually makes a lot of sense. But of course, some patterns will have the pattern, stitch pattern all throughout the sock and even on the sole. And some of them also say that the pattern was not intended to have any design at the back or the sole, but you can do it if you wanted to. But again, practically, you really just need a fancy design on the instep of your socks. So these are gorgeous, beautiful design socks by Celine Bos. It was a pattern test. I used, again, Australian designer hand-dyed yarn. I think it was cat and sparrows fibres in the colorway pink salt lake, which is absolutely beautiful color. So yeah, so this was my first cuff down pair of socks. The first sock that I ever made was a toe up. Now toe ups, actually a lot of people find them a little bit more professional looking, and they're a little bit more how did I describe it, a little bit more the right way to do a sock, only because the way you cast on, you are creating like a little pocket where your foot, your toe will sit, and you can keep expanding by increasing the number of stitches and then forming your foot or the toe area, and then continuing to work the foot of the sock. So let me show you a toe up sock. The very first sock that I made, which I can't find where I put it. Oh, here we are. It has been well worn. So I use self-striping yarn. I think it's KFS sock yarn that I bought in Japan a while ago. And you can tell that we're being very well used. I love wearing them in winter and to bed in those cold nights. Again, you will form with this is a toe up sock. So you will form, you cast on using either the Turkish cast on method, which I find the easiest, or the Judy cast on, which is a little bit more trickier to cast on and create a little pocket, and then you'll expand by increasing all the way along and then just working the foot and then creating the heel. Now the heel you can do very different ways, and there's different patterns that we choose a different way of constructing the heel. In this particular pattern, this is called a vanilla sock pattern, and I will put a link to the pattern in my description box below. You will go along just doing normal stockinette until you get to making your heel, and then you will divide your sock into two. So when you're making the heel, the back, the stitches in your second needle, you will increase to make room for that heel, and then do some short rows and then connect to make the leg of your foot. So that's a little bit complicated actually, and I found this construction a little bit more challenging than you cuff down. But again, it's worth trying both techniques to see which one you prefer. In reality, although people find that toe up socks are a little bit neater and more professional looking, if you look closely at the toe up and the cuff down, there is really not much difference. I think they look just as good. You wouldn't really be able to tell holding up that this is a cuff down and a toe up sock really, but it's really your preference. I do recommend a cuff down if you're a beginner, but definitely give both a go for sure. Okay, so let me go back to cuff down socks. So this I'm using the regia self-striping yarn. As I mentioned before, what you do is you cast on your stitches, and the way you hold your needles is you will have needle 1 will be the instep stitches, and needle 2 will hold your heel or your sole kind of stitches, your back stitches. And so you kind of work the sock front and back, instep and your sole all the way along. And as you can see, I'm up to the step where I create the heel. So I've gotten as much as I wanted to in terms of the leg of the foot, and then I'm working just the back needle or the needle 2 stitches, which are equal amounts. So there you're having X amount at the front and the same amount at the needle 2, and you create using German short rows, you will create the heel, and then you will pick up stitches on the side and join in the round. So you will create a fold that is actually quite plush. If you go back to my finished sock, once I finish the length of my heel, I will pick up the stitches on the side here and then join in the round, and it looks quite neat and with very minimal gaps on the side, with just a tiny little bit gaps here, and then you continue to do the sock. So that you will continue this way, sorry, for the toe, the cuff down sock, and then just seam it, do some decreases for the toe, and then join the front and the back with some Kitchener stitches. So yes, so what are the socks? So these ones are toe cuff down. Okay, so the next sock that I'm going to show you is again a toe up sock, and it's a gorgeous design by Celine Bos. So once you made a sock fairly plain, you're ready for a challenge. You can try a sock which has an integrate pattern, just like this one. So with this one, you cast on socks at the top of the toe, do some increases as you can see on the edge until you reach the side width, and this will depend on your shoe size, and then you will continue in just working in pattern all the way to just before you and then to form the heel. Now this sock pattern does not require any increase in stitches for the heel, but features some turn and wrap technique, which can be a little bit challenging, but there are some YouTube videos to show you. So by turning and wrapping, you will then increase gradually like a diagonal to form your heel. So that will be a little bit challenging. As I said, socks are fairly straightforward, but the heel and the start of casting on the toe is probably the most challenging bit. But hopefully I will show you put some links of videos to show you how you can master this technique, because it just takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of patience. So if you're starting songs, don't rush, take your time, enjoy the process. So yeah, so in this heel does feature some turn and wrap techniques to do to make room for the heel, and then picking up stitches to then continue to work on in the round and create the leg of the foot. Now with this type of sock, you're doing it in like a magic loop, so it doesn't matter the length of this cable. So in this in toe up socks, I am working with stitches at the front, or the needle 1 and needle 2 at the back. So I just finished doing the pattern, which is a beautiful cabling effect, creates these beautiful dimples, and I've come to the last 2 stitches. So I have knitted in pattern across needle 1 to create the front, and then by magic I pull needle 2, put the stitches back onto the needle, turn around, take this off, and then continue working the back stitches. So you're continuing to do this motion, this magic loop technique, where you're working your stitches in 2 parts. Part 1 is the instep or the front stitches, and then part 2 is the back stitches. And this type of needle is perfect for that, because it makes it really comfortable to work the back and the front using the magic loop. And there's no fiddling, you don't have to adjust the magic loop at all, because you have divided your stitches equally into the front and the back. So here I am, I'm working the back of the sock, and when I come to the end, and as I said, the back of the sock is usually simple stockinette with no pattern, because you're not going to really see the back of your foot. So once you come to the end, I'll show you again how the magic loop, and this type of needle is ideal for toe up socks. I've come to the end of my needle 2 stitches. Oops. Then I will turn around and to work, getting all tangled up, very tangled up. Alright, so then to work the front stitches, again, I simply pull my needle 1 back to the top, the tip of my needle, and then start working the front again. And again, this is a magic loop, but it's not your usual magic loop. You don't have to fiddle around with it. It'll always be working to and fro, and it's just really quite easy and comfortable to work with the magic loop in this way. And again, you start working the front. So I would recommend, if you're doing toe up socks, and it will work as well with cuff down, but particularly for toe up, really comfortably with a needle that has a long cable and quite long needles as well. All right, guys. So this sock is almost done. I'm going to do a couple more pattern repeats and then just work on the cuff and cast off. The other thing that I recommend for toe up socks is that the cuff, when you cast it off, use a very loose cast off method, because when you're putting on your sock, the top should have a really good stretch. So when you cast on, the pattern I recommend a loose cast on. When you cast off, definitely use a loose cast on, because you don't want it to be too tight when you're putting it on. See how it stretches, the stitches stretch with the ribbing, because the ribbing is quite stretchy, but if you don't do a stretchy cast off, it will be really rigid and you'll feel like you're going to break your sock when trying it on. So don't forget to cast off loosely when you're working toe up socks. So this one is really almost ready, and it's a pattern test. Watch out for the pattern release. If you are a sock knitter, this is an amazing little integrate pattern that you will memorize the actual pattern very, very easily, and it's really cute, isn't it? So yeah, so this is should be finished very soon. I think I'll finish it hopefully tonight. We'll see how we go. So what else did I want to tell you about socks? Knitting socks. I hope that I'm making sense and that I'm not all over the place for you guys. So the last thing I wanted to show you is that you can, obviously, if you're a beginner, making one sock at a time makes sense, because you're just learning, you just want to get used to the different techniques and the way you cast on, cast off, all that kind of stuff. Especially the heel construction can be a little bit challenging, so master that. But once you've got your knitting quite down pat, why not knit 2 socks at a time, which is really the way to go. So these socks are designed by Celine Bos, and it is a kid size version of the Lavender Malt sock with this beautiful lace design at the front. So as you can see, it's a cuff down, so I'm working upwards. I have created the heel by some short rows, and this beautiful bumpy effect is made by some slip stitches and simple slip and knit stitches to create this lovely ribbing and a bit more rougher feel on the heel, which makes sense because that's where your heel will go, and there will be lots of wear and tear for that. And the challenging bit, I will always say, is the heel for the sock, and for toe up, it's the actual casting on could be a little bit challenging. The Turkish cast on I find a little bit easier, although it feels a little bit less, the stitches feel a little bit more looser with the Turkish cast on. So probably the Judy's method is probably a little bit more professional looking, I think, or the toe stitches seemed a little bit more neater, but the Turkish cast on I think is much more easy to understand and to follow along. So yeah, so these are 2 socks at a time, and the hard thing is over. I've created my heel, and all I'm going to do now is do some decreases, and because you pick up stitches and then once you pick up stitches, you then have to reduce back to the normal stitch count. So with socks, you always, the front and the back, so your instep and the back of your foot should be equal amount of socks, except when you equal amount of stitches, that is, except when you're making the heel. So once you make the heel, you will pick up stitches or increase stitches, and then you'll decrease them to continue working your sock, or in this case, the foot of my sock. So this is a little cuff, and they look so cute. This is going to be for my daughter. So yes, so these are getting along. This should be ready soon. And again, if you do 2 socks at a time, once you finish your project, they're ready to wear. Whereas if you do 1 at a time, you'll have to cast off and then restart again to be able to wear them. So once you get the hang of it, 2 at a time is definitely worth it. Now the other thing that I wanted to say, well, actually to summarize my advice and tips to start to knit. So I would recommend for beginner, you've never made socks before, try the cuff down method. Don't choose a pattern that has intricate or pattern designs on the instep, because it will be just a little bit too challenging. I will put a couple of patterns down for beginners, beginner friendly patterns. They are some of them are included with video links, which for the challenging bits like casting on and creating the heel. And once you finish your first pair, then you can try a different way of constructing the heel. For instance, you might find that one is better than the other for you. So give it a go. Take your time. Don't forget to choose the right type of sock yarn. Doesn't have to be hand dyed or fancy or expensive, but don't forget that it should contain some nylon so that it can withstand the wear and tear. If you have any questions, please comment below and I'll be happy to answer it. And let me think of the other advice I have. Yes, one thing, toe up socks. Another advantage is, although I feel the toe up socks, so starting from the top and working up, is a little bit more challenging, I find that it's much easier because, for instance, if you're about to run out of yarn, for instance, you've already done your sock. Like, I've already finished it. I could cast off right now. If I'm really running low on yarn, I don't have to continue. But if I have a lot more to spare, then I can make it longer. Whereas with your toe or your cuff down, you're kind of stuck because you might have made a really long leg and then you're running out of yarn and then you don't have enough yarn to finish the sock. So with the toe up, you will have the luxury to decide, oh, actually I can go longer or I can go shorter. And it will be fitting just fine because you finish your foot. So that's another advantage of doing the toe up method. You can, you've done the hard bit already and then you can keep going or make it as short as you like if you're doing the cuff down. Alright guys, I hope that all makes sense. I hope that you got motivated to try out some knitted socks. I shall continue to create this, finish off this sock actually. And so happy knitting guys. I will catch you next time. Bye.